everybody. This is Allie Craig, and this is EmpiHER TV, where every single week we introduce you to another amazing woman who is building her empire and share with you the real story. Because yeah, there's a lot of success, but there's also struggle along the way to help you see what success looks like for our guests, but also for you and when you're building your empire, because there is no straight road to success, and it isn't necessarily meaning that you're a multimillionaire. So today we have Cathy Droz with us, and her empire is something deals with cars. Like, that's, for most of us, especially being woman, that seems almost unheard of. So tell us your back. How did you get into all this?
Interesting. My brother was involved in fixing cars, etc., at the house we're talking back in the 1950s and 60s. So in the garage, he'd be fixing cars, and 10-year difference in age. So I would hang out. My mother would say, go outside with your brother, so you're around cars. And I might have been playing Barbies, but him and his friends were learning about cars. And then my parents would buy a new car every year. And at age 10, my father said, you come with me. I'm going to teach you how to buy a car. So 10-year-old little Catholic school girl goes along. Mom didn't want to go. And that's when I started. So age 10 through 17, we bought a different car every year. 1 year I would start out as just learning about the negotiating process. And then by age 17, my dad just said, go buy the family car, which I did. And the staff thought they were on Candy Camera at the time. And Dad came in and paid for it, and it was the car that I chose at 17. So I had no fear going into an auto dealership. I had no fear whatsoever. After that, married, raised family, different jobs, but finally got into the automotive industry as advertising and marketing because I felt I understood who the real buyers were, women. Mm-hmm. And so all my advertising and marketing was geared towards that, and wound up doing that for 8 different agencies in a large group in the Phoenix area. And after that, I was hearing the complaints from women about how difficult it was. How can you be in the car business as a woman? I didn't have a problem. So someone suggested I write a book, how to, help women buy a car, research, etc., give the statistics about buying power of women, my story, and an easy guide on how to purchase a vehicle. The key was each chapter ends with, if I owned a dealership. And that's what got the attention of auto dealers and manufacturers. And in turn started a training program for auto dealers on how to have women buy from you, not how to sell to women, how to have women buy from you, and how to raise the CSI score, which is the index of customer service for the auto industry. Did I condense it?
You did awesome. Yes.
Okay, great.
So you didn't plan this out then. This wasn't like, you know what? Babies are done and raised, and this is the empire I want to build. It was a complete organic evolution.
It was organic in the sense that children are raised. I get divorced from my husband. I have no college education. I have no job. At the time, the only thing I was doing was Smitty ads, and you would have to be in the area to know it was a newspaper. I looked very much like the woman who did the TV. Her name was Jan Diatri. She's from here. So that's what I was doing, and that was it. And that did not exactly pay the bills, but it introduced me into a person who had an ad agency and asked me if I would do some of their work. I think the viewers should know, which I thought was interesting. I knew nothing about writing copy. I knew nothing about TV or radio. The owner went out of town. The auto dealership said, where's our commercial? So I looked at some old scripts and I made something up, and sure enough, all of a sudden I was writing copy for advertising, and it just evolved. I liked it. I liked the automotive industry. I worked well with the dealers, opened my own agency with $500, and I rented space inside an auto dealership and started, and that's what's so interesting. There I had nothing. And then in 2 years, I was making 6 figures in the advertising agency, but specialized. My niche was automotive dealers. We got along. They listened. I understood. So you can start with almost nothing, but once you focus and find your niche, and that's always been important. I haven't gone in it, so I don't do advertising for restaurants. I don't do advertising for other. I stayed on the course.
So cars. That's not something that's common necessarily, especially for women per se. You know, there's so many social stories around cars and girls. But what brought you into focusing on cars and having that be your niche?
Well, that's interesting because of my age, in the 50s and 60s, it was not common for a female to be involved like we have nowadays. So many mechanics are females. So it wasn't Dad, because he didn't know the difference between a spark plug and Spanx. My brother was already out of the house, but he was a car person. It was me loving the looks of cars on the road. When you're able to, as a girl, to be able to say, oh, that was a Le Mans, that was that Grand Prix, oh, look at that go by. You know, that was different. But what was most important was I was not afraid to go and buy a car. I wasn't afraid to talk about it. I was a shy girl. So for me, when women would come to me later on and say, how can you be in the car business? Oh my gosh, I'm afraid to buy a car. I realized that I needed to build confidence in that female, first and foremost, and take it from my experience. Being able to research at age 10, we didn't have the internet. Gosh, I'm really sounding old, but we didn't have the internet. So when I would go to the family and say, what car should we buy? I mean, I was cutting out of brochures and putting up, which should we do? Wow, probably why I got into an ad agency. So that was my love. And I think I brought other young girls into understanding cars as well. So it seemed natural. And I really wanted to help women not be afraid. It's like if I were on an airplane and I look in the cockpit and there's a woman pilot, I'm like, you go, girl. Mm-hmm. Because I really feel we can do just about anything any man can do. So I hope that answers your question.
That completely does. So success is not a straight line. I mean, especially when your business is evolving organically. What along the way surprised you as either a struggle or like, I was not expecting this kind of result, good or bad?
Good or bad. I think what surprised me along the way was that I thought it would always be a disadvantage being a female in the automotive industry. But I made it work that it was an advantage. So the first time that I went to any large event where I was test driving a vehicle for a manufacturer, I walked into a room filled with old men. Quite honest, well, they're probably my age now. So old men, and I remember they all stopped what they were doing because they were all talking cars, etc. And I went, hi, and they all just went right back to what they were doing. And I thought, wait a minute, I know about cars. I test drive them. Why are you not talking to me? You don't think that I know? So that was what surprised me. I thought for sure they would welcome me. If that's,
Yeah.
So along the way, that was a deterrent in that sense. But then when I realized that I needed to stand out, and how was I going to do that? And that was the test driving of vehicles. So I've test driven 500 cars in 12 years for manufacturers, not dealers. Oh. They deliver a car to my driveway because they wanted to know what women thought, me in particular, from a lifestyle point of view. So I don't need to know the difference between spark plugs and Spanx, other than wearing the Spanx.
Yes.
So that's really all that I needed to know. So I started what now you call influencers. 20 years ago, I was writing about what it was like to take your children in the car and did the seat belts work the way that the manufacturers said. So I think that is learning in a success is if one thing doesn't work, you need to find what your niche is and not look at what other people are doing. I think that's don't read what other people are doing. Don't move forward. If you're confident in what you're doing, that's what it is. And stick to it.
So going from the ad agency to actually test driving cars for manufacturers, how did you make those connections? Because that takes a lot of kahunas to say, hi, manufacturer, you don't know me, but you should know me, and here's why. Like, what was it about? Was there an instance that either sparked you to say, you know what, I'm going to go after these manufacturers, or how did you start making those relationships?
This is interesting. There is a large newspaper in the Arizona area called the East Valley Tribune. It was at the time. They wanted to have someone test drive cars and write about it for their newspaper. Other newspapers always had a man. They called me into their office because they knew I did advertising and marketing for a large group of dealers. And they said, Cathy, we're thinking that we're going to give you cars because they'll fight over it here at the newspaper who will do it. What if we give you cars? Will you test drive them and will you write about it for our newspaper? And we can only pay you $20. And I said, well, I had the agency at the time. I said, no, I'd love to, but here's the rules. I'm going to write it like Sex and the City. And they said, what? I said, yes, I'm going to have my secretary and I are going to test drive, and it's going to be funny, and it's going to be banter. And they said, well, we have to edit. I said, you can edit. I said, but it's going to be humorous, and it's going to be about where we take the vehicle and how it worked with whether we went to a local bar or we were going to a Diamondback game. It didn't matter. And they agreed to it. So I did that for years. And then the manufacturers just kept calling and saying, will you drive my car? Will you drive my car? You write about it. So I started a website, and from there it just... I've had people call and say, is this a good car for a dog? Would you take my dog in it and see if, So I've done it all. In fact, next month, the Phoenix Fire Department, I'm going to be test driving a fire engine. It's kind of on my bucket list.
Wow.
So they said, yeah, you can do it. So that's what I'll be doing next month. So that's the fun part, and then I'll write about it. I've done motor yachts. People have asked me to do that.
Wow. So then is that where your book comes from the articles?
It comes from, no, actually the book is all the fact that, you can go to my website and see the articles, but the book is truly the buying power of women. Don't overlook us, not just in the automotive industry. We're making the decisions, we're spending this kind of money, so it's statistics. My story, and then the rest of the chapters are on, here's how you do your research, make sure your credit is right, everything that needs to be done. So when a woman walks into a car dealership alone, she doesn't need to have a man with her, she doesn't need to have dad, she already has everything she needs to know. And then negotiate, you walk out. If they're not going to give you the price, there's so many apps out there, you already know, you walk out.
And I love how you end every chapter in your book. Can you tell everybody what that line is?
Yes, if I owned a dealership. So that means if Cathy Droz, with all my knowledge, experience, and what people have told me, if I owned a dealership, this is how it would be. And so much is customer experience, customer service, because women will pay more for a vehicle if they've had a good experience. And whereas a male, usually the counterpart is more about, I got the right price, and good old boys club. But the woman, they will pay more for that, and that's statistically correct. So because of it, there have been manufacturers that have, asked me, what else would you do? How else would you do it? But that would be free information, wouldn't it?
Yeah, don't want to give free information to the manufacturer.
Yes.
So with your ability now to go in and start training sales associates in different car dealerships, what's the number one thing that you're telling them that they need to kind of shift? Because though we're talking about cars, the truth is that sales is sales on many levels, and we all have bad programming. And I think for female entrepreneurs, far too often we try to act manly because that's what we think is the way we're supposed to sell. So what are you telling these dealerships that they need to kind of flip so that our female entrepreneurs can take and maybe look at themselves and think, maybe I shouldn't do that the next time I'm trying to close a client or whatnot?
Right. You talk about authenticity. So I am what I am. I'm an older female from New York.
Love that New Yorker girl.
Accent comes out now and then. I am a grandmother of 9, mother of 3. I like to travel. I have the husband that I was divorced. I remarried 10 years after that. So I'm real about that. That's all in the book. And that's what I would love to see the younger entrepreneurs be, is more authentic, whether the word is overused or not.
You're talking to people who are in the sales side of life, and so they have bad habits, basically, would be the nice way of putting some of their sales tactics of how they're trying to convert someone to say yes to buying the car. As an entrepreneur, we learn some bad habits as well, because we see, we read an article in Inc. magazine, they're like, okay, here's the 3 steps to closing any deal. And it feels very inauthentic as a woman to do it, but we're thinking, okay, well, the expert, quote unquote, said to do it. What are you going into the car dealerships saying, like, number one, stop doing this. Just stop stop the high pressure tactics kind of thing,
or
stop
following us out in the parking lot.
So what are you telling? What's one thing that you are constantly like? Just stop those people when it comes to selling cars.
I have gone beyond what the norm would be. Shake the woman's hand. Don't look at her breasts. The whole thing that someone can tell you. But I think the most important thing they get out of the training, and which was very important to me, is the psychological part, is that women and men, it's not left brain and right brain. It's men and women are born, our brains are a certain way. So in my presentations, which I think we have to remember that men and women shop differently. And in the auto industry, like any industry, it would be a perfect example. I use as examples of number one customer service, Ritz-Carlton, Wegmans, which you would know of Wegmans. Most people on the West Coast don't. And then you have, and Starbucks. They're all very calculated so that they appeal. Bed Bath & Beyond, number one, whatever they put in their potpourri or whatever is going through, they know a certain feel, flavor, fragrance that women like. Car dealerships in particular have no clue. So they really, I can go into a ladies' room at a car dealership and there's dust on the plastic flowers and maybe they've run out of toilet paper because they don't realize that the female, that's important to them. And it is a reflection on the dealership or what they're buying that day. For an entrepreneur now, for a young lady, back in the 70s or 80s, we were dressing in suits to look like men. Funny that I'd be wearing a suit today, but I couldn't conform to that. I always wore heels and a dress, and my femininity is who I am. Just because I'm in the auto business, I don't want to be one of the guys. Oh my goodness, heck no. I don't want to be one of the guys, but I do want to be able to let them appreciate me for my experience, my intelligence, and how I treat them. That's the most important thing. If I treat you with respect, Mr. John Doe, I expect it in return, and if I don't, I will. I have a very nice way of saying, I think you should have worded it this way. So I think that our younger entrepreneurs coming up need to stay true to who they are and not conform necessarily to what is expected.
But I love what you just said also about you have a way of nicely telling somebody that the way they spoke to you was not appropriate in that moment. And I think far too often as entrepreneurs, and just even as women, we are concerned about speaking up because, well, I don't want to offend them because maybe they didn't mean it. And then we go into this whole story in our heads and we get ourselves sidetracked and we almost kind of give up our power because we're like, well, we don't want to hurt their feelings.
Right.
Whereas there's always a way to nicely say what you just said, reword it. Like, this is the way it really should be. Or did you really mean it in this way? Just to kind of clarify that situation so that the other person understands that this wasn't acceptable to me.
Correct.
And you nip it in the bud right then and there versus as women, I think we take on far too often, oh, it's us. And, we put all the onus on ourselves versus like, no, this is a two-way street. This is a relationship here.
Exactly. And Allie, oftentimes back in the dealership days when women would file suit against men, for harassment, let's just say, I would be part of that. Oftentimes, it was the women that, instead of stopping them from using bad language, one day they decided they were offended.
Yep.
And so I feel like the first time if anyone uses language I don't find appropriate, I say, you know what, let's rephrase it. It's not acceptable because I'm not saying that word to you. So I don't want to feel like one of the guys. I don't mind feeling like their mom, their mentor, or their wife, but I want to teach good behavior. And selling cars, sales. You have to know that a woman, and it's not just, oh, that woman, or, oh, well, that's a blonde, or I'd like to tell you the original title of my book, which was interesting, which I had to change. And it was, don't let these do these high heels make me look stupid? That was the title of the book. And the reason was, working at the dealership, having a office, my ad agency was inside one. I would often go down to the showroom floor. And when a woman walked in dressed fairly nice, or, heels or anything above jeans, they would maybe say to each other, oh, we got this, This is not a problem. And I resented it. So I started actually with those dealerships, working with them on, I would do the sales meetings. because the owner said, "Will you do the sales meetings?" It was fun because it was all about teaching them that pay attention to that woman, because that's going to be your buyer in 10 or 15 years, and their daughter is. So that's kind of it. Look to the future.
And I love that perspective, because just because you have an assumption doesn't mean that you're reading that person right. And love the boys, but the boys are not very good at reading nonverbal communication naturally.
That is true.
Are a smidge clueless. We as ladies get it naturally a little bit more, but that's really essential, especially when you're trying to, this is all about relationship building. If it's selling a car, if it's selling your service, your product, it's about creating that connection and that relationship. And if you already made the assumption that, oh, they're not worth my time, they know it. You don't have to even speak to them.
They know, and it's interesting that they don't. I do have an acquaintance that went into a Porsche dealership to buy one. And she parked her Bentley on the side of the dealership so no one could see it. She came in, she said I was dressed in jeans, no makeup, and she said no one even approached me. And when I asked, I'd like to test drive this, they said, this is a year ago. This is not 1962. They said to her, well, do you want to wait for your husband or significant other? They thought they were politically correct because they said significant other. But what they were saying is, is someone else coming? And she said, oh, no, that's really okay. She walked out and she said she got in her Bentley and she drove very slowly right by. She said she could see them all looking, but they lost a sale because they assumed. And that's wrong. And it has gotten so much better. I think my sales training helps them to understand how men and women think differently. That's all.
Well, I have a story about that. It's not even that long ago. I was at an Infinity dealership, dressed how I normally dress, and I wear my heels. And I was told that they didn't think I could afford the Infinity.
No way.
And I was like, because they thought, I'm like, I don't look that young. And I was just like, really? Because you don't even know how much money I make, and you didn't even ask if I was paying cash or I was financing. And I'm like, wrong assumption. Exactly. And so I went to the manager and I said, I need another salesperson because this isn't my person.
Good for you.
Like,
and that's I say that in the book. Pick your salesperson the minute you
just
walk
because
in.
They give you one, and like I was even handed off to, because the one they gave me, I said I want the hybrid. I know exactly what I want. I want this hybrid. And they're like, you don't want a hybrid? I'm like, no, for how much I'm driving right now, I really want the hybrid. Even if it saves me 3 miles extra on gas, that's worth it. They're like, then they gave me the new person who didn't even last a week at the dealership and told me things about his life he shouldn't. But he was willing to sell me the car, and that's all I wanted. I just wanted to buy the car.
Obviously, they're not HER certified, so we'll talk later.
I need to give you their name. I'll be like, let me give you the contact there, girl. So where is this building? What are you building to?
Honesty, genuine. At my age and where everyone around me is retired, and I'd like to spend more time with those 9 grandchildren. The goal all along has been to get it to a point where I'm comfortable selling it to an organization that I believe I would just be the face of, hopefully not the face of, but you know what I'm saying.
Spokesperson yep.
For. Very much like Angie's List, she went off into the wilderness. So I am looking forward to and would love the connections with large automotive groups or Cars.com, someone like that. The goal, and I suggest that to all entrepreneurs, there needs to be an exit strategy with everything.
Yes.
And they need to know where is your end goal. The best information, and hopefully this helps too, the best thing that I was ever told, I had a radio show years ago with a gentleman called Two for the Road, and we would have on excellent guests over the phone. Alan Mullally, we would have, Mario Andretti, you name it. However, we didn't make really any money. We had a couple little local people. So the gentleman who ran the radio station said to me, Cathy, here, I'm going to give you some business advice, and here it is. Find out what the industry you love needs and build your business around it, instead of you deciding what the business needs, because you'll always struggle. So every year, Automotive News, front page, need to, have more women buy cars, need to do this, that, and the other thing. And I thought, well, I know enough that that's exactly what my goal is going to be. I'll write the book to help women, but then I'll do the sales training so that the auto dealers know how women want to be treated. Win-win, that's all that I care about. Win-win situation. That was exactly it. So that is what I did. It's taken years to do it. This is not an overnight. And I will consider myself a success probably when that large corporation or Warren Buffett calls me on the phone. We have lunch, the whole thing. 'Cause I'm sure that'll happen. But that will be, to me, and I have to also say to other entrepreneurs, females in particular, I didn't do this to make money. It's a passion. It is something that my parents both lived to be 99 years old and both encouraged me to the day they died several years ago that I could do anything. No college education, go through a divorce, no job, whatever, that I could do anything, and that I'm determined in their memory that I will make this successful. So that's where I'm at. It's not always money. It's a promise.
For most of us, it isn't always money, but I love that you're willing to say, you know what, my whole goal is to sell this. I want to build it so I can sell it, because far too many as female entrepreneurs, we're scared because maybe that means we're disingenuous about our belief. And it's like, no, clearly you are passionate about helping women understand how to buy cars and helping car dealerships understand how to sell and really create the relationships with the women.
Isn't that a win-win?
Exactly.
And if I get to sell it and make a few dollars, win-win-win.
There you go. That's the way building an empire is all about, right?
You would know.
Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story. That is another episode of EmpiHER TV, because guess what? Building your empire looks completely different, and it's completely up to you what it looks like, what it feels like. So I hope you found Cathy's story inspirational. I know I did. And we will see you guys next week for another episode of EmpiHER TV.